The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Good afternoon and welcome to Chit-Chatting with Jocelyn. I'm so glad to have you back again. We have a fabulous guest today, and it's Daniel Richard, and it's not Richards unless it's possessive. So we have Daniel Richard. He is a New Hampshire historian. He knows the New Hampshire Constitution inside out and backwards. This is a man that was born in Canada. His parents brought him here to the United States. He became a United States citizen. He joined the military and served for our country and became a citizen of the state of New Hampshire, which is going to be what we talk about a little bit in the second half of the show. But for right now, we are riding high right now because we, 50 to 100 of us, showed up at the Supreme Court of New Hampshire this morning at 11 a.m. to hear this wonderful gentleman fight for our rights, fight for the sovereignty of the state of New Hampshire, the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and everything that is about us, we the people, we the citizens. So I want to say welcome, Daniel, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am very happy to have you. So why don't we take this a little bit step by step. What first started you thinking that, oops, there's something wrong here? Gosh, this isn't making any sense to me. Wow, there's nobody listening. And if I do find something wrong, who am I supposed to go speak to?
Oh, absolutely. I think like many other Americans, the Obama administration woke me up. During his the Obama period. Many Americans woke up. The Tea Party was born out of a response to his policies. And that's when I started questioning things as well. And so it was that point where I started asking questions because things didn't add up. You know, the Constitution as written, anyone who takes the time to read the U.S. Constitution doesn't take very long to figure out that, gee, what the Founding Fathers said, what they meant, does not, our current form of government doesn't look anything like that.
Correct.
So that's when I started questioning and started doing my own research.
All right. So some people will say to you, as they've said to me and others of us that help you with research and writing and educating and everything that we can do to get this message out, but it's 2022. You know, we don't live in the 18th century. We're not, old-fashioned people. This is where there's way more technology. So you know what? None of that stuff matters. What would you say to them?
Well, that's ridiculous because everyone who says that would be missing the fundamental point. The fundamental point is that our constitutions as written are a basic social compact. And that social compact operates under the premise that in order to grow government, it has to be through the consent of the governed. In other words, the people must authorize more growth of government. What is authorized in the Constitution? The protection under the state constitution specifically is the protection of life, liberty, and the acquisition, possession, and protection of property. And so anything beyond that requires the consent of the people. And this fundamental fact has been lost in our culture. So when we look at the big picture, what's happened is that this basic premise has been replaced by a two-party system. Growth of state and federal government has replaced the people, citizen legislators, from being involved in politics. And now we have professional politicians.
So what originally was we the people, speaking with, instructing, whatever the word you want to use, our legislator, our representatives to do XYZ has totally fallen apart and been replaced by a two-party system.
Absolutely. The two-party system is a creation of the legislature. It's not a creation of the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution authorizing or establishing a two-party system. It was the outgrowth of the competitive nature of getting your candidate elected. So what began as probably an honest attempt to grow government or to expand how government represents the people was clearly perverted. And it was only done so through all of the time from the foundation to today through apathy. I said that today in front of the Supreme Court, right?
You did.
Which was, why did the right of redress of grievance fall out of favor? Because of ignorance and apathy about the laws and our fundamental basic civics, and the fact that we don't, our schools, our public schools no longer teach this. Our law schools don't teach it.
No, they don't.
We saw that today. We had a Supreme Court very attentive, dealing with state lawyers who are completely, they have some awareness, but they don't teach it in law school. You know, I called UNH Law School, spoke to their professor, the lead professor that teaches their school for law school, and I asked him the fundamental question: do you teach the state constitution? And he said, other than procedural matters, no. So there you go.
But procedural matters pertain to the legislature and the attorneys, but the Constitution applies to we the people completely without question. But yet they only want to talk about procedurally we teach it. Well, then how does anybody know their rights?
Well, I think they were referring to more importantly, the case precedent revolving criminal law, right?
Yep.
What is the procedure? What is the established precedent as to how we have to manage cases that come before us? And so that's really the backstory to that.
What I find interesting, just in that comment, you know how I hear different words, and I'm not afraid to make mistakes or ask the questions you guys don't want to ask. So never be embarrassed to ask a question. There's only a lousy answer, not a lousy question. No, there's only a lousy question. There's only a lousy answer, not. I've got that.
The only bad question is the one you don't ask.
There you go. I knew there was something like that. Boy, it's been a long day, everybody. So, you know, they talk a lot about, I don't want to get off topic, but they talk a lot about criminal cases, and everything seems to be focused on criminal cases. And it's almost as though the rest of the law has just been, you know, shoved under the carpet. You know, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, your rights, that's okay.
Right.
You know, that's not a big deal. You know, we got to take care of the criminals. And I'm not saying that it's not important. And look at what we're dealing with now. Nobody's dealing with anything. But it seems that over the decades, they have not been teaching civics. They haven't been teaching anybody their civil rights. They don't know about, civil rights. They don't know about the state rights. They don't know about the state constitution. They don't know about any of this. And I think back into school, and I don't remember them ever talking about this.
No, they don't. I remember myself in Manchester, growing up in Manchester, that my introduction to civics was called social studies. And social studies taught during my time in school was a glossary cover of the federal U.S. Constitution.
Yep.
Giving a basic overview, but leaving the most important document out, the state constitution.
Correct.
Because most people are unaware that there are 51 constitutions. There are 50 sovereign states. Each of them have their own constitution, and the U.S. Constitution that ties them all together. So you have two constitution, two bills of rights, and two different jurisdictions, state and federal.
Correct.
And so we're only taught one half of the equation. And that gets to a bigger problem beyond the scope of our topic today, which is the abolition of the sovereignty of the state and everything being nationalized and federalized. And that's what we're living with. And that's why our functioning government today operates strictly on a federal premise.
Correct. And
people regurgitate the supremacy clause. Oh, the supremacy clause, the supremacy clause. They miss the point. The federal government is supreme within its enumerated delegated powers only because you have to go back to the 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment says specifically that all powers not specifically or enumerated to the federal government are retained by the
state.
Or excuse me, are and not prohibited to the states, are retained to the states and or to the people.
Correct. Which is basically stating that your state, you the people, are sovereign.
That's right. Absolutely.
So with that, we'll save that for the second half. How did we get here? How do we have people that don't know there's 3 branches of government in the state, which match the 3 branches of government in our federal government?
Right.
How do we not know that there's state sovereignty? How do we not know that the state works for us? How do we not know that the federal government has a compact which for the states?
Right.
That the whole pyramid is upside down. But we'll touch that on the second half of the show. So talk to me about, how did you get to the Supreme Court today? What was the event, the issue that prompted you to push back and say, these are my rights, this is what I'm asking for, and you started at step 1 and the almost final step? Final step is the Supreme Court, which was today.
Right. I would say that my journey began with 2 major events in my life. First was picking up a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Mm-hmm. The Creature from Jekyll Island is a second look at the Federal Reserve, explaining our monetary policy. What is money? Who makes it? Who controls it? And more importantly, its effects on history. So if you really want to know history, learn who financed it. Learn who financed all of these conflicts for thousands of years, right? Jesus Christ in his ministry, whether you believe in Christianity or not, what is a historical fact is that a man named Jesus flipped tables in the temple on the money changers.
Correct.
Right? And it was the only time he used force in his ministry. And so this book opened up history for me in a way that I had never heard it before. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that happened to me is I came to the knowledge of a brilliant woman named Chris Ann Hall, a constitutional law professor from Florida. And she does, and it's available for anyone who wants to see it today. If you look her up online, Chris with a K, mm-hmm. and Chris Ann Hall, and she does a teaching called The Genealogy of the Constitution, where she walks you through how our country, New Hampshire, and our Republic of the United States come to be. And so if you don't know that basic story, then you can't know what the Founding Fathers intended. Mm-hmm. Did you know we had a Bill of Rights under the English Bill of Rights, and it was the cause of the Revolutionary War?
I do, because you told me.
That's right. That's right. And so most people don't know that.
Correct.
And so if you don't know the origins of written government emanate from the 1100 Charter of Liberties, mm-hmm. where we have the first written social compact between the people and the creation of the king. Mm-hmm. And that's another story. But you go from there to 1215, the Magna Carta. Right. From the Magna Carta into 1628, I believe that's right, the Petition of Right. Mm-hmm. And then the Grand Remonstrance of 1648, which led to the Glorious Revolution, right, of 1688, which led to an English Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And so those things lead to, so everything we know about our constitutional rights emanates from those stories. You have to know why these rights are so important. And by the way, the most important of all of those rights was the purpose of my Supreme Court case, which is the right of redress. Mm-hmm. See, without the right of redress, there is no other right, because securing that right in Magna Carta, when you look back at the story of Magna Carta, it's a story too long to get into right now. Not terribly long, but the point is that the Englishmen of the realm of England had become very upset with the king because he refused to honor what? The Charter of Liberties.
Correct.
The written Charter of Liberties. So when the king refused to honor that, that's when they grabbed him, put a sword through his throat, and said, "Hey, we'll let you live, but guess what? You're going to sign this document. Mm-hmm. And if you breach this document, we can wash our hands of our relationship with you and dissolve this allegiance and alliance. We can withdraw our payment of taxes. We can withdraw our fidelity to live in harmony with you, mm-hmm. and if necessarily, attack you militarily." And so this begins, and it is this right that puts in motion all of our other rights. That's what I said today at the Supreme Court.
You did. You did very, very, very well. And I saw a few eyebrows go up, and I saw the other two, not other two, but the two lawyers squirm in their seats. And it was quite a sight to see, an attempt to loosen up their neck, because I think they were getting a little hot under the collar, which so they should. So, redress of grievance. When the people have no other means to take care of a problem, they shall be allowed to approach the legislature, the general court, to speak of that, to have them address it,
Absolutely.
to have them deal with it. And that hasn't happened for a number of years. The one state attorney said that was because it fell out of favor.
When did the Constitution fall out of favor?
Exactly. Because that's saying exactly when did the Constitution fall out of favor? And what is fall out of favor? And who was that person that made that decision? Who said that was okay? Who said, I'm boss, I'm God, and I'm changing the rules,
Right.
This is my world, I'm changing the rules. That doesn't happen. So you filed a remonstrance.
Correct.
And a remonstrance is to remove a law?
Yes, it's a stern written protest where you're telling your government official, your government body, that they've violated the compact, that what they've done is a breach of this compact, and that you are demanding that they fix the problem. And so I did so in, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was May 20th, 2019.
Sounds right.
I filed a remonstrance with the sitting legislature at the time, which was run by the Democrats, and I was protesting voting laws.
Okay.
I was protesting the fact that the legislature cannot change how it reelects itself. And that's exactly what it was doing. It was using the legislative process to change voter eligibility and qualifications by statute. And you can't do that. We the people, we mentioned we the people being sovereign, and that's exactly right. 1.3 million people of New Hampshire make up the body of the sovereign people. Sovereignty doesn't lie with an individual. See, we reversed that paradigm with getting rid of a king. Right? The king was sovereign, he made the law, everyone was subject to the king. So when we inverted that paradigm, we went from having a king to the people becoming the kings and queens and possessing all of the power.
Correct.
And that's the whole point. That's why our first article in our Bill of Rights, of New Hampshire Bill of Rights, states very clearly, all government of right originates from the consent of the governed. And so when this is ignored, then the people have a right to redress a grievance. And to that point also, what I'd like to share with your audience is the most important part of that. Remonstrance and redress a grievance is how you prevent revolutions. Because when you don't give people a safety net, the ability to say, hey, you went too far.
Yep.
You need to change course because you're in breach of contract. If you don't allow the people to correct their own course, then it leads to violence.
Correct.
It always has historically. That's why when you read within the first sentence of New Hampshire's Declaration of Independence in 1776 is that very statement that the king refused to address the petitions and remonstrances of the colonists because the English Parliament was taxing them with no representation and so on and so forth.
Wow. So you file a remonstrance. It's given to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and they are supposed to present it to the legislature, which is the general court. That's the same, they're synonymous terms. But they didn't, did they?
No. And really, let's go to the basis of what they're supposed to do and why it's called the general court. The general court was called that for a specific reason. The way our self-governance was established was that government would grow through the concerns and the grievances of the people. See, under common law, a grievance comes about because someone has harmed another person. There's an injured party, right? They talk about standing, that you have been hurt by somebody else. And so when that happens, that you want to seek a remedy. And so this is the beginning of the basic premise of common law. And so when they go from that period to 1784, when New Hampshire finally adopts its constitution, is the general court was established under this redress of grievances by petition or remonstrance, so that when John citizen or Sally citizen brings their grievance to the legislature would hear that grievance. It would hear and then debate amongst themselves as to how to solve the problem. This is how laws were to be made pursuant to the Constitution of the state. And so what happened was that had to go away. See, the two-party system realized there was an impediment called the people. And so in order to go around that process and to accelerate the growth of government, they created the two-party system. Because then you shut out the people and you ignore this process. So the state lawyer, when he said our rights fell out of favor, he's kind of right in the respect that the people were so ignorant and apathetic to their own rights. As our friend says all the time, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And that's what happened. And so that's how the growth of this type of state power, both at the state and federal level, has happened.
So at what point, so I can hear people saying, well, you know, you're supposed to go to court for that. Well, they didn't have courts at that point the way we know courts today, that if there's a problem, you hire a lawyer, you go to the court and you tell them what's going on and they decide for you or against you. The legislature was the general court, and that's how problems were taken care of at that time.
Well, there were criminal courts and civil courts.
Correct.
So that wasn't the issue. The issue was that, and this goes to my case today, in 1818, here in New Hampshire, there's a case called Sherburne versus Merrill. And that case was predicated on a person who had lost in the courts. And the issue with the courts is the courts judge the law. The law created by the legislature. So he lost. He lost based on the laws set up by the state legislature. So what did he do? He went back to the legislature and said, hey, the court did me wrong. The court was wrong, and I want a new trial. Well, when it was taken back to the court, it was rejected, taken back to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court said, no, 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 no. Under Article 37 of the Bill of Rights, called separation of powers, the judiciary, it was delegated the specific power to adjudicate private matters. So if I have a dispute with you, that I must use the court to resolve a private dispute.
Yes.
So the court said, from this point forward, the legislature cannot operate as a judiciary to undermine the courts.
Third branch, correct.
And so what they did is they also reaffirmed within that opinion the jurisdiction of the state legislature, which is to manage public matters. Issues that are of public concern are the purview of the legislature to conduct tribunals to resolve public policy matters. And this is where the right of redress and remonstrance never went away.
Correct. And that's why you were able to approach them, and because it was about voting laws, changing, and that pertains to the people. It's not personal.
Right.
It's about the public. It's about the people. It's a grievance that we have, and we're supposed to have the right to bring our grievances to them, but yet that doesn't happen. Yet that has fallen out of favor. In other words, stuffed under the carpet, ignored, or they're simply ignorant of that fact, have not been educated to that being their job at the beginning of every session.
Absolutely. If you listen to the lawyers' arguments today, they were basically advocating all along, and they advocate today, that they want to remove any accountability. They don't want to be held accountable for passing bad laws. They simply want all solutions to their creation of a problem to be regulated to their machine, the machine of making law. So, in other words, I challenged the legislature's changing our voting laws. They want me to only be constrained by voting the next bum in. They don't want to be held accountable or to be challenged that the fact of the matter is that they did actually violate their oath.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing. And that's why they don't want us back there, because all the gains they make, this long list. I mean, when you look at our statutes today, we've got more than 10,000 statutes.
It's insane.
And it's an unending list. When you see what they've been doing in Concord, it's a nonstop. It'll give you a headache if you try to keep up with the persistent, continuous legislative process. How's there 1,000 bills on deck before the legislature's even elected?
That's my point. So, and at what point do our grievances get heard? At what point, where is our input? Because if they're starting with 1,000 bills at the first session, I didn't approach them. I don't know anybody that approached them and said, I would like you to bring this to the floor. I would like this to be a law. I would like you to do something about it. We have never, in years that I know, ever had that opportunity.
Exactly.
But yet they show up just like the first day of school with their little backpack. They've got their 1,000 bills. And well, they came from We the People. No, they didn't. They didn't come from We the People. That's a big, fat lie.
And who do they seek for counsel? Two entities. Office of Legislative Services, created by lawyers, staffed by lawyers. And then they look to who? The two guys that I argued against today.
Yep.
You have paid lawyers who then operate in a manner to obstruct accountability, right? Those lawyers shouldn't even have been there. Why? Because Chuck Morse and Sherman Packard should have hired their own lawyers.
Right.
Because they violated their oath.
Correct. Why should We the People be paying for that? And why should the state be protecting them on a very obvious breach of oath?
Well, and it goes to a bigger problem statewide. All the moms and dads that have been fighting the school boards and the mask mandates are up against the same thing. You have the municipal association that does the same thing. They offered the towns and the municipalities a discounted rate on their insurance bond to keep their insurance premiums low. And instead, those lawyers show up to do what? Not to stick up for your rights, but to cover the payout by the insurance company and reduce the liability of public servants who violate their oath.
Exactly. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and come back on the second half of this show. We're going to talk more about the New Hampshire Constitution and specifically what it means to you and me. Welcome back to Chit Chatting with Jocelyn, and my guest again, still here, is Daniel Richard, and he is a constitutionalist and a historian on the New Hampshire Constitution specifically. He has been educating everybody that he can talk to, that he can reach, to teach them about your civic rights, your constitutional rights, what's right, what's wrong, what the legislature should do for you, for us, what we need to know, what we need to ask them about, what we need to demand. We have to stop being afraid of these words because none of these are implying physical violence or physical touching, but we must demand of our representatives that they follow the Constitution and they protect our rights and not take any of them away. But yet day after day, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, this is exactly what has happened. They have been buried under the carpet. They've been washed away. We've been told, oh no, the federal government's in charge of that. Oh no, that doesn't work that way anymore. Oh no, that's not true. If the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire has not been amended, and I mean amended by We the People, your legislature cannot go in and go, oh, we want to change this, we want to change that. They can't do that. They say they can, they pretend they do, but they can't. These are things that we need to learn now. These are things we need to be educated on now. Daniel has started the committees of safety, and we will talk about that, how this is a repeat of history, why we are at this point. How did we get here? Why do we not understand the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire? Why are we so afraid to say, you are my employee. Why are we afraid to label the legislature as the employees of we the people? It is our tax money that they take. Because I don't know anybody that voluntarily pays taxes. We're willing to, if we can see what it's for and it's not taking away our rights or stealing anything from us. So, Daniel, on that note, what do we really need to understand to start to right this ship, which is almost ready to go totally under?
Absolutely. Let's start with basic contract law 101. Offer, acceptance, and consideration. The offer to contract is the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Public servants run for office, and those who get elected have what? Accepted the public trust. So there's the acceptance, right? Mm-hmm. Then we, the people, also accept the agreement, the social compact, by swearing an oath to being faithful to obey our laws, pay our taxes, and be part of the community and contribute to it. Not only when called for to the defense of the nation or the state, but also to serve in the jury, the grand jury and petit jury system, and any other mechanism of civics. So what's been lost on our society is that government, state government specifically, is a social contract. It really is. It's a contract between you and your state government. Mm-hmm. Because I have news for most people. The federal government wasn't created to protect your rights. The state was. So this is what separates the federal government from the state government, right? So this social contract says very clearly that in exchange for paying taxes, being obedient to the laws, that in exchange, the government has what? A fiduciary duty to uphold the provisions of the compact. The compact is what? The state constitution.
Correct.
Part 1 is the Bill of Rights. It is the whole purpose of government. Government is created, as we said before, to do 3 things: to protect your life, your liberty, and your property. Let's back up a second. What is the protection of your life? Your protection of your life is what we refer to today commonly as Homeland Security. It's not law enforcement. It's protection of your home territory to keep foreign raiders from invading.
Yes.
What were they dealing with in England? Why did they create a king? They created a king because they kept getting invaded by foreign
Vikings
raiders. Right, by the Vikings, and those of the mainland of Europe would invade the island of England, whether it was Scotland, Ireland, or England itself, right? And so they would invade and they'd rape and pillage the locals. And so they said, you know, if we create a king, he can deal with our international affairs. Sound familiar?
Yes.
The creation of a sovereign king to deal with international matters so he could build international alliances and allegiances for both common defense and trade and commerce.
Right.
And so this is the fundamentals, but these things aren't taught anymore. You know, we get the glossary with social studies, but it really leaves out those important elements, most importantly, the state.
Correct. I was really not aware of what a huge part your state played in your rights and your life and everything. So many times you are told, well, you know, Washington, the U.S. Constitution, that comes after everything else, with the exception of 3 items. Right. It still comes after everything else. Your state, I think you have said, you've used the word to me, and it finally sunk in, that each individual state is a country.
That's right. That's right.
That's another thing.
The word state does not mean county. The word state means a country.
Correct.
So 13 countries, 13 colonies became countries. That's the other thing. So let's back up a second. You have the travel across the ocean by the people of England who were given charters by the king to occupy the land, to come here to America, to this uncharted land, and start acquiring and possessing the property here. And so this set up the colonies of England subject to the king. Well, after that didn't work out, what did we do? We then went to all of those colonies became states.
Correct.
This predates the U.S. Constitution. So New Hampshire, by the way, was the first of all 13 colonies to declare its independence and actually write a state constitution. It was a temporary document, but it was the first.
So, first in the nation.
Right?
Has a little bit different meaning
For a
when you
lot
go
of
back
reasons.
into history. Yep.
For a lot of reasons.
And then, so we have the 13 colonies that have become countries.
Right.
And those 13 countries,
Wrote constitutions.
correct, they all have constitutions, they all have Bill of Rights. They all have a judicial branch.
Right.
They all have an executive branch.
That's right.
And they all have a legislative branch.
3 branches of
Three
government.
branches of government in your state, in your country. And all 3 of those forms of branches of government may not, shall not, cannot give their authority to the other.
That's exactly right. It's called non-delegation doctrine because we, the people, in our Constitution, didn't give our state government or any branch thereof the ability to give its power to another branch.
Yet, what did we see in the last 2 years?
Lots
We
of that.
saw, we'll talk about New Hampshire, we saw a governor, well, we saw a legislature give their power to a governor to make health laws, suspend or make health laws, to change voting laws. We have a judicial system that just threw up their hands and closed for 2 years.
It's disgusting.
We have a legislature that threw up their hands and closed the state house, our house, which, oh, by the way, the people's house.
Right.
We have a people's house in our country, in our state, just as there's a people's house in Washington, D.C. And, oh, by the way, they're ours.
That's right.
They do not belong to the president. They do not belong to the governor. They do not belong to the Congress. It does not belong to the legislature. This is another ton of facts that people don't realize. We have a Supreme Court. Every state, every country has a Supreme Court. You were in that Supreme Court today. I was in that Supreme Court today. People go, Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. is not the only Supreme Court. We have one in the state, in our country. The two are different. They deal with different problems.
Absolutely. When you look at the, my whole point today, and this is where the state lawyers tried to muddy the waters, take a state case and make it a federal case. And the basics are that the state constitution and state issues are held and argued before the state Supreme Court. The federal courts under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution were created specifically to adjudicate matters between citizens of different states, between the states, between international countries, between countries around the world. And so that's the purpose of an Article 3 court. And so that's not how it's been expanded. The 14th Amendment opens up a whole can of worms we don't have time to get into today. But basically, those are radical changes. But I want to go back to something about fundamentals, and that is the creation of the state created a body politic. Because there's so much discussion today about corporations and the corporations running America, and I want to break that down quickly. The state of New Hampshire is a body politic. Part 2, Article 1, the preamble to the government, to the state, defines the state as a body politic. Now, why is it a body politic and not a body corporate? Because the body politic is a creature of the people, not the creature of law of the legislature.
Correct.
So we, the people, gave our legislature and our form of government, Part 2, the capacity to operate as a body politic to represent our interest. We gave them in Part 2, Article 5, the ability to make laws, rules and regulations for who? The state.
Yep.
Not the people, the
The
state.
state. Okay.
And so that gave them the authority to create all our municipal subdivisions, the creation of the corporate body, our counties and our towns and our cities. Why? Because the purpose of a corporation, of a public corporation, is to give it three specific features. One, in order to do the business of the people, is to hold real estate. So you can set up a building for a town hall or courthouse or any other register of deeds and on and on and on.
Business.
To conduct business. So a corporation is created for that purpose. The second thing is so that they can do banking business, because how else are they going to take taxes, right? Establish taxes, collect them, and pay the bills. They've got to have a bank account.
Okay.
The last thing is so they can sue and be sued. If you don't pay your taxes, you have to have standing and have the authority to take Johnny Citizen, who's decided now that he doesn't want to pay his fair share. Excuse me, which, by the way, was really the paramount thing, fair share, right? That you're going to contribute your share to the expense. That's long gone. It shouldn't be, but it is.
Yes.
And so this is, to take the last and final step, is who do you think created the corporation called the federal government? The states.
The states did. We didn't.
So the state legislature created the town, the county, and the feds. They're all corporations. They're all bodies corporate to do the business of the people. Now, the problem is that today, the federal government, the corporation created to do the business of the states, now runs the whole show. And it does so because of the 14th Amendment and then finally federal aid. Federal aid since 1933 has been bribing the states, compelling them to, it's the way the federal government bribes your state government.
Right.
So New Hampshire's politics is all about one thing. 50% of our state budget is predicated on federal aid.
Federal aid, right.
And so what you have is all those people loyal to Sununu now or to any other governor. Before him, it's always been the same game. We've just paid more attention to him this time around because of COVID.
Correct.
But this has been going on since 33. So what you have is the entire two-party system simply stands in lines. And this is why certain people their political activism comes to an end, because they won't toe the line. Because when they were given the opportunity to do the bidding of the party, to advance the party agenda, they didn't go along with it because it was the right thing to do.
So they get rid of them.
And they get rid of them. And
so your employer takes taxes out of your paycheck, sends it to the federal government, not to the state, to the federal government, who spins it around, puts it on a spin cycle, and bribes it, sends it back to the state. So, well, you can have this, and you can have that, and you can have this if you do this, but there's strings attached. Right. So our money taken from our paychecks without our permission, sent to the federal government, which we never gave permission for.
That's right.
Is washed, laundered, cleaned, and sent back as a bribe with lots of hooks in it to our state, of which the legislature is supposed to decide how it's spent, but yet we have the executive branch making decisions like that, which is not okay.
Absolutely.
And we're on the hook for paying it back when we, the people, never asked for those bribes, for that federal money, for that free money. But yet we're on the hook for it. We're the debt slaves, and we didn't sign on the dotted line.
Prior to 1913 and the 16th Amendment, there was no federal taxation. Taxation was apportioned so that hypothetically New Hampshire at the time, or at any period of time, let's just pick an even number of 10%. If New Hampshire is 10% of the U.S. population, the state of New Hampshire would then collect the money from its citizens to pay the feds.
Right.
And so the feds would squeeze who? The state.
The state.
Not the people.
Correct.
Remember when I started this explanation of the social compact? Show me the contract with the feds. Is there one?
There isn't one.
Right. So how are they capable of extorting a tax from you when your state constitution says they can't? See, here's a dirty little secret. The state constitution, the Bill of Rights, Article 28, says very clearly that only your state legislature has the authority to make law, to tax you, and to do your business on your behalf on those matters enumerated to them. So if that's the case, and we only gave the state the capacity to tax us, and we forbade them from giving it to anyone else, because as it uses the language specifically, I believe, that for any reason whatsoever, they can't do this.
Correct.
Back to non-delegation doctrine. The legislature could not and did not vote for the 16th Amendment because they could not give their taxing power to a corporation.
Correct.
That's what they did.
But yet they did.
They did.
And now we have a federal government that's taking taxes without us ever giving them the permission.
Right.
The Constitution was never amended. Nothing was ever signed. There is no contract.
Right.
And not to get off topic, but to get off topic, we now look at the federal government taking taxpayer money and sending it to other countries.
That hate us.
The money isn't even coming back correctly to the people. So it's sending it to other countries. Well, but Jocelyn, you got to help. And no, we don't, because there is no contract. There is no agreement that says you can take these trillions of federal dollars and send it to another country without our permission. But yet they do. And this is where people have become apathetic, ignorant of the fact that they can't do that. Well, they have done it. Right. Well, we have to stop it, which is what you're talking about. And you have to stop it at the local level, and you have to stop it at the state level. And we, the people, have got to hold them accountable. Transparency, I can't stand that word. You know, this is transparency because I can still see you. You know, well, if we're transparent, they're going to tell the truth. What planet do you live on?
Right.
You know, it's accountability. You screwed up, you're going to jail.
Right.
You stole my money, you're going to jail. But that's not happening.
No, they've insulated themselves from all accountability. To back up a second, the corporation, the federal government, its fiscal agent is the Federal Reserve. Its legal counsel is the Bar Association. That's how it all works. So what do you have? You have a private corporation, a private internationally owned bank. Mm-hmm. See, the Federal Reserve isn't federal.
Correct.
There are no reserves.
It's international.
It's an internationally owned, a bank owned. The founding members of it were the Rothschilds, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, and so on. There's a lot written about that that I don't need to repeat. But the point is, they created this institution that now acts as a pariah. See, we have this parasite, our monetary policy, where they are willing to lend our politicians unlimited quantities of money they print out of thin air for the purposes of what? Controlling the government.
Correct.
He who makes the gold makes the rules. And this is what's at play here. It always comes back to the same thing. What does Scripture tell us in the Bible? That the root of all evil is the
money.
love
of money. Not money, but the love of money.
And so this is it. So now, who do you think is profiting from all of the printing of money? This international banking cartel. Correct. And so what do? Why are they willing to lend us unlimited quantities of money?
Because the government. Interest?
No. Well, not only because of the profit motive, but their money is secured. It's the best banking business to do. Let me tell you a short little story. For your viewers who have not seen this, next time you get a chance to see National Geographic's history class on the Men That Made America Great was the title. Okay. Talks about the robber barons of the Industrial Revolution, back to the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and all them, right, and all of the big families of the day. They all were taking advantage of their situation, and so they then put in motion when the government went after them this because of the monopoly, the trust. Back then it was breaking up the trust, right? And a funny story in the movie is this: J.P. Morgan's father, Pierpont, I think was his name, was an agent of the Rothschilds. And he was livid at J.P. Morgan for funding Thomas Edison. And the reason was Thomas Edison ultimately brought electricity to America, but he was the first person responsible for electrifying New York City. And so the problem was JP was actually doing a pretty good job. He'd learned his father's trade as a banker, and he was starting to make investments and becoming a very public figure. His father was livid with him. Instead of congratulating his son to learning the banking trade and being prosperous, right, that he would care for himself and do a good job, and he was good at it, he was livid with him. You know why? He wanted him to hide behind the shadows. He wanted to do what the Rothschilds do best, operate through their surrogates and live amongst the elite families of the world by financing every revolution on the planet. And that's their goal. They have a sole mission of, they are the puppet masters. They are the wizards behind the curtain. And it's not just them, it's them and all of their surrogates, all of the mega trillion-dollar entities, the families, the big families.
Wow. It's mind-blowing. It
really
truly is. That is a subject for another day that we need to talk about. How can people learn about the Constitution? Where can they get this education, sign up for classes? That's cosnewhampshire.com or newhampshirecos.com?
I believe it's cosnh.com.
Okay.
There was a discrepancy with the acronym because when we tried to get Committee of Safety of New Hampshire or New Hampshire Committee of Safety, someone else owned the domain name. So the website was posted. So right now it's cosnh.com.
All right.
So Committees of Safety is a concept from the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers in 1775 in Boston wrote a directive to all the colonies to establish a committee of correspondence. There was no technology, and so the first thing they had to do to prepare for the returning king, because they wrote the Declaration of Independence, told the king to get lost. King wasn't going to take it lying down, was he?
No, he wasn't.
So they got ready. So they created committees of safety. Committees of safety had committees of correspondence, committees of protection, committees of observation, and this was the temporary government to operate in the absence of a rule of law. And so they put in motion all of these tools. And so as a historian, I was aware of this. So when I found ourselves in this crisis, I said, well, look, the only governments around the world are changed by only two means: the ballot box or the end of the barrel of a gun.
Correct.
Violent revolution. And so obviously the only intelligent solution is a peaceful one predicated on knowledge. So we started Committees of Safety here in New Hampshire for the purpose of educating people. So that's where our mission is all about, educating the people of the state. To sidebar quickly is the Tea Party brought us vote the bums out. Voting the bums out didn't work.
Nope.
Why? Because the people simply elected more bums.
Correct.
Let me define a bum. A well-intended volunteer who runs for office, gets elected, but is no more qualified to hold the seat than the person who elected him.
Before him, yep.
And so this is what's going on. And so how are we going to change that paradigm? We have to have smarter voters.
Correct.
We have to convince the people of the state to turn off their television and start communicating with themselves and start understanding their rule of law, knowing what it is so they can enforce their own rights, because they're the only ones who can.
Exactly. And that starts with the school boards,
right,
and knowing what's being taught to your children,
Yep.
what you're paying for, what you shouldn't be paying for, and it goes to literally the ballot box and the voter integrity, which we have found is not good. It's not legit. It's not what they say it is. Our vote is being, I don't even have the words, but our voter integrity sucks.
Hey, look, you have Russia in the last few days identifying the obvious. Joe Biden's got dementia and he's incompetent. And then his press conferences get worse by the day. Yeah, it's a big deal. We have a man who campaigned from his basement and they want us to believe that our elections were secure. Everyone knows that's not true.
Correct. And if you haven't seen it, look at the video, Hacking Democracy. It's a fabulous video. And it will tell you everything you need to know about voting integrity. It also talks about the Constitution. So make sure that you join us here again. I will be here next week Chit-Chatting with Jocelyn, and we will definitely have Daniel back again so we can get some more incredible history. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.